Well, good morning, Bay Shore. Who's excited to be at church today? It is so good to see you guys. Before we get started, can we just make some noise for our band? Man, so thankful for them. It is so good to see you guys. If we haven't met before, my name is Cotter, and I'm the Next Steps pastor here. Now, did you guys know this is like a special week we're getting ready to go into? This is what, I don't know if it has a name, but I'm going to call it Leap Week, because we get our 366th day of the year this week. Thursday, it's our bonus day. So I don't know what you guys are doing, probably working or going to doctor's appointments or something. That's probably what I'm doing. So I hope you guys do something special, though. Celebrate that bonus day. Something else special about this morning is that we've got our online family joining us today. People that join us through the podcast during the week, people that are on Facebook and YouTube right now. So can we make some noise for everybody watching online? If that is you, we are thankful that you are with us and thankful for you guys being here in the room. Now, how many of you guys watched the Super Bowl a couple weeks ago? Yeah, okay. I don't remember a whole lot about that game. The one thing I don't think I'll ever forget is how good Usher can dance. Did you guys see that? Like, he was moonwalking all over the place. It was incredible. He was just, the whole time, it was like all these songs I don't think I've ever heard. And then he's just moonwalking all over the place. And then he disappears like halfway through. And I was like, what happened to Usher? Like, we need more of these dance moves. I don't care about Patrick Mahomes right now. I want to see some more Usher. And then he comes back on roller skates. It was the craziest thing. We got a picture of it. Look at that. I mean, the man can dance in shoes and in rollerblades. It was incredible. And roller skates, that brought me right back to my childhood. Not actual roller skates, because I was born in the 90s, and we thought roller skates were really lame. But rollerblades in the 90s, those were so cool. If you were rollerblading, you were awesome. There's always been kind of like a rivalry between roller skates and rollerblades, and let me explain why. We got a picture of your typical guy that wears roller skates. It's not a great vibe right there. Now, I hope I don't offend anybody. I found this picture, and this guy's from Delaware. So I hope that he's not in the room. If he is, man, I apologize. But this is not the best look. Listen, short shorts just shouldn't happen. That just should never happen. Mustaches are kind of back in right now. Like, that's cool. The high socks, the short shorts, and then what is on the man's head? Like, it looks like he's got a ham radio sticking out of his ear there. Rollerblading, on the other hand, rollerblading is cool. If you rollerblade, you are awesome. Let's show you a picture of some rollerbladers. Look at these guys, man. They look tough. You see that hair? Like, that is just 90s gold right there. That is amazing. And this was from a movie called Brink, which in the 90s, rollerblading was cool, and Disney Channel original movies were very, very cool in the 90s. I love this movie. But you'll notice something on their elbows and their hands. They've got pads on. Because rollerblading is so extreme that anything can happen. It's just so awesome. You never know what awesome thing you're going to do next. The craziest thing that can happen on roller skates is that your ham radio might lose signal. That's about as cool as it gets on roller skates. And in the 90s, my brother and I, we were super into rollerblading. We loved it. And we loved playing street hockey with our rollerblades on. Now, we lived like out in the middle of nowhere on a farm. And so none of the roads near our house were paved. We definitely didn't have a driveway that was paved. The only thing we had was this like square concrete pad that my parents put in for us to play basketball on. So we'd play roller hockey on there, but the ball was just constantly going under the bushes, going out into the yard, until one day my brother decided to grab some of my dad's straw bales from up in the barn and put them around like a border, and it was awesome. It was like a total game changer for us until my dad got home from work. Then it was a game changer in not the best way. And so he wasn't super psyched that we took 20 of his straw bales that he needed for the cows to put around the basketball court. But he made a compromise with us. And so his compromise was that if we helped him harvest the straw in the summer, we could use it during the year. Now, has anybody in here harvested straw before? A lot of people. Okay, listen, when I was working on this, I thought nobody would raise their hand. A decent amount of people in the first service, but that's like 15 of you guys. Harvesting straw is the worst. It is so intense. You do it in the middle of the summer. It is 1 billion degrees outside. And listen, if you haven't done it before, this is basically the process. It is 1 million degrees. You are going through a field. There's a tractor that is making the straw bales, like the ones you have at like fall festivals and stuff like that you just kind of sit on. Those are just kind of like shooting out of this tractor, and they're in the field. So you got a crew of people that follow behind. They pick them up. They throw them up onto this trailer. Then you got people on the trailer that grab them, throw them to each other, and then stack them up. Now, when the trailer gets full, we would take it over to our barn. And my dad had a really good idea to put all of the straw in the second story of the barn and not on the ground. And so then what you do is you hop on the trailer and you launch it up into the big doors that open on the top of the barn on the second story. And then you got people up there throwing it to each other, stacking it up. It's 1 million degrees, and it's just hours and hours and hours of that in the summer heat. Harvesting straw was zero fun at all. It was such hard work. But being able to play roller hockey all year was definitely worth it. It made all that hard work worth it. And isn't it true that sometimes the best things in life require some hard work? Sometimes the best things in life require us to really work hard. If we want something great, whether that is a spouse, whether that's a family, whether that's some usher dance moves, or maybe it's just a really good job, we got to put in some work to achieve it. And so today we're going to read a story about a man named Daniel. And Daniel was taken from his home, and he was taken to a place that was hostile to everything that he valued, from his name to his diet, and especially his God and the way that he worshiped God. And what we see in Daniel's life is that he was surrounded by people who were hostile to his lifestyle and his beliefs, but he did not allow that to affect him. He faced all of those challenges, and he still held on to his faith, and he remained committed to God. And he was willing to make some sacrifices, to put in some really hard work to get the best thing in life, which was a relationship with God. And so we're going to get into the story. We're going to be reading from the book of Daniel, starting right in the beginning, chapter 1, verse 1. We're going to have all our verses on the screen this morning, but if you need a Bible, we've got free Bibles out in the lobby right next to the coffee. You can also follow along on the Bible app on your phone. If you're on your phone, the Instagram app is not the Bible app. So I don't think you can follow along on there. But hey, if that's what you're into, as long as you're in the room, that's great. So look, here we are. We're going to start out Daniel 1, verse 1. It says, in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the articles from the temple of God. These he carried off to the temple of his God in Babylonia and put in the treasure house of his God. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility, young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that, they were to enter the king's service. So this book, it jumps us right into the action. In the first verse, we see that Judah is being taken over by Babylon under the rule of King Nebuchadnezzar. So Judah's taken over, items from the temple are seized, and then people from Judah are also taken captive. And from this group of captives, the king of Babylon orders that a select group of Israelite boys be taught the Babylonian language, their literature, and be trained in 3 years to be brought into the king's service. And there are a lot of qualifications for who these boys were. He wanted Israelites from the nobility, from the royal family, without any physical defects. He wanted them to be able to quick to learn and understand, to be qualified to serve. And so Judah had been conquered by this foreign power. The temple of God had been taken. The items from the temple of God had been taken. And then their people had been taken. And now the select group of their best boys are being re-educated in the ways of the Babylonians so they can serve the guy who just took them from their home. So let's hop back in. Let's keep reading. Verse 6. It says, among those who were chosen were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel, the name Belteshazzar; to Hananiah, Shadrach; to Mishael, Meshach; and to Azariah, Abednego. So in the previous verses, we saw that these boys would be selected from Judah to be trained in the way of the Babylonians so they could enter the king's service. And here we see exactly who those boys are. So you got Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And the first thing that happens to them is that they're given new names. So their Israelite names, those are taken away and they're replaced with Babylonian names. And names have a lot of significance, right? Like back then they had a lot of significance, and even now names have a lot of significance. If you have a kid or a pet, you're naming them something significant, something with meaning, or a family name. Now my name is Cotter, and 50% of the people that I meet call me Connor with like N's. There are no N's in my name. Not my name. The other half of the people that I meet call me Carter, with an A and an R, also not really my name. And about 1 out of 100 people that I meet will call me Cotter, and I'm like, that's amazing. That almost never happens. And I tell people, look, it's a super weird name, and I understand it's very hard to figure out, but it's kind of like an otter, like the cute animal at the zoo, and you just put a C in front of it, and then it's easy to remember. And look, my parents, they thoughtfully named me because of the deep, significant meaning behind my name. No, I'm just kidding. Not at all. My name is not from Welcome Back, Cotter. That's a K. Every college professor I had to be like, oh, welcome back, Cotter. And I'd be like, I've never heard that before. So it's not that. It was actually some movie that my parents watched in the 80s. It was like a random actor, and I think it was their last name. I don't know what movie. I don't know what person it was. And so I tried to research my name just to kind of figure out, like, maybe there's some meaning there. Like, maybe there's something deep. And my name means cottage. Not like the cheese, like the old English building. And so I wake up every day and I look in the mirror and I say, you are going to be the greatest old English cottage that Delaware has ever seen. No, I don't want to rag on my parents. I think my name's like, weird and cool and stuff. But my middle name does have like some significance, some like family history with that. But names all have significance, and especially for the Israelite people. And so Daniel and Mishael, they had names that ended in El, which is a reference to Elohim, which is a name for God. Azariah and Hananiah, they have the endings IAH or YAH, which is short for Yahweh, another significant name for God. So their names, they were a part of them. They identified them as children of God. So Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylonia, he came in and he wanted to change their name to erase that heritage. He wanted to erase their identity to the Israelite God and replace it with names that made them loyal to the Babylonian culture. So the new names given to them, to Daniel and his friends, were Belteshazzar, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and those were all references to Babylonian deities. So the goal was to erase their memory of their Israelite God and replace it with a new identity, a new allegiance to the gods of their new land. And so this name change, this was the first of 3 major steps of trying to assimilate these boys into the Babylonian culture. So here their names were changed, and we read in verse 4 that they were to be re-educated in the ways of the Babylonians. Let's put verse 4 back on the screen. It says, he, meaning Ashpenaz, was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. So their upbringing, their entire life as Israelites is being blotted out so that they can be made into true Babylonians. The goal was for them to be true Babylonians, not just Israelites that were living in captivity. Nebuchadnezzar wanted everything about their past to be wiped out, a clean slate so they could be completely remade and re-educated. So that's the second of the 3 major steps of assimilation into the Babylonian culture. Their names are changed, their education and their language is changed, and now we come to the third step. And up to this point, Daniel and his friends kind of went along with these things. They didn't resist, they didn't fight back. They just said, well, we're in a bad situation, and this is just kind of what we have to deal with. But then step 3 of the assimilation came in, and that is the change to their diet. And let's check this out, starting in verse 8. It says, "But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way." So this is where Daniel kind of drew a line in the sand. He put his foot down and he said, "I'm not going to defile myself with the royal food and wine." So why was this different from the name change and the education change? Well, names are significant. They have a lot of meaning, but that's just like an external thing. You know, they could change his name to Belteshazzar, but he knows his name is Daniel. You know, people call me Cotter or Carter and Connor, and you can call me English Cottage if you want. I know my name, you know, it doesn't change what people call me. And then his re-education, learning a new language, that was something that he could filter through as well, because he was old enough to know the ways of the Lord, so he could learn the things that he needed to be able to serve in the king's service, but that wasn't going to change his values and his beliefs. The name and education, those are both external things that did not impact his relationship with God, but the food was different. The food was where he put his foot down because he wasn't willing to act in a way that dishonored God. And eating that food and wine would be in direct conflict with how God said is the right way for him to live. And so why the food and wine were significant, it really comes down to two things. And this is sourced from commentaries from people way smarter than me. And so the first thing is that the king's food was likely offered to pagan gods and idols before being served. And so they were going to eat it. That's like a way of participating in idolatry. So they couldn't do that. Second thing was concerning this food is the atmosphere of the Babylonian feast when they would be eating this food. And I want to quote this from MacArthur because I love the way that he explains this. He says, "The lavishness, the drunkenness, the rest of the wildness that went with such events would be against the simple purity that the word of God demanded." He continues on to say that the Jewish dietary laws were not primarily for health reasons, they were for separation reasons. And that was because of the behaviors that would happen while this food was consumed in these other societies. So Daniel, he put his foot down when it came to the food because he wasn't willing to reject God with his actions. He didn't want to be a part of these meals and these activities that happen at the meals because they would dishonor God. And so he refused to compromise his beliefs. This is a turning point for Daniel and his three friends, where they chose to remain faithful to God despite all of these cultural pressures that were on them to conform. So over the next few verses, a few things happen. Daniel relays a message to the chief official in charge of them that they won't be eating the king's food. Instead, he asks for a 10-day period where they can only have vegetables and water. And the official was, a little hesitant, but he ended up going along with it. He was afraid they'd be malnourished after those 10 days because they didn't have the king's food. But then after those 10 days, verse 15 says that they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men that ate the royal food. It's not cool. And then they continued on in the training to be a part of the king's service. They did the education, they kept their new names, but they abstained from the king's food. So let's read these final verses together, starting in verse 17. This is after the 3 years that they go through this training. It says, "To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. And Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. At the end of the time set by the king to bring them into his service, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked to them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom." So the official was worried that these guys would fall behind because they weren't following the diet set out for the other young men. But what happened? God blessed them. Because they were faithful to God, he blessed them with knowledge and understanding. And when they stood before the Babylonian king, he couldn't find anyone equal to them. Verse 20 goes so far as to say that they were 10 times greater in knowledge and understanding than the magicians and enchanters in the kingdom. Isn't that crazy? That they stepped out in faith for God. They stood up for what they believed in. They were willing to resist the cultural pressures that were on them, and they stayed true to God. They aligned themselves with him even when it wasn't popular, and God blessed that faithfulness. And that's what I want us to see from the story today. There's a lot of cultural pressures on us as Jesus followers to fall in line with how the world thinks, and to fall in line with how the world acts, to talk the way the world talks, to watch the things that the world watches. We're living in a time where what the Bible says is not popular. We're living in a time where saying that you're a Jesus follower, that's not popular. Look, I grew up I played in this rec soccer league at the YMCA in our town, and I played with all kids from all over the town, and almost all of those kids went to church. So they were at my church or somewhere else. They went to some church in the area. And when my parents were growing up, it was even more of a societal norm to kind of go to church. A lot of their friends went to church. My grandparents were growing up, almost everyone went to church. It's not like that anymore. Things have changed, and things have changed fast. And I think when we read stories like this in the Bible, it should hit home for us, because we're living in a world that looks a whole lot more like Babylon, a place that had no interest in God, than we are in a place that looks like Judah, which was completely focused on God. What the Bible values, what Jesus values, those things aren't valued anymore. It's not popular to forgive people. It's not popular to be kind and loving and thoughtful. It's not popular to be honest. It's not popular to say there's one way to heaven through Jesus alone. It's not popular to say that the Bible is God's word and it's 100% true. Every word, every phrase, every page, every command, it is our standard. It is our roadmap. That's not a popular thing to believe. What is popular is to look out for number one, which means just look out for yourself. Doesn't matter about anybody else, just look out for yourself. What is popular is to buy into postmodern thought. And look, I try to avoid big words because I don't think big words have any value if nobody knows what they mean. But this is an important word. Postmodernism is the prevailing thought, is what most people believe. And it's a belief that there's no absolute truth. It's a belief that everything is relative. It's a belief that's what's true for you doesn't have to be true for me. And as long as everyone is happy and we all get along, you can believe what you want, I can believe what I want, and we can all just be happy. We hear people say all the time, you just need to find your truth and believe what you want, because they believe there's no absolute truth. There's no standard of right and wrong. It's just, whatever you believe is great as long as it makes you happy. This way of thinking, it's in direct conflict with what we believe as Jesus followers, because that is not what the Bible teaches. The Bible lays out clear guidelines of what is right and what is wrong. The Bible's clear about which attitudes are beneficial for us and what things are harmful for us. There's clear teaching that the only way to heaven is through Christ alone. So I believe that there's a lot of practical things that we can take away from the story. And trust me, we're going to get to some practical things from the story in a couple minutes. But man, I think this story is so spiritually rich. We need to be bold in our faith. We need to be wise in our faith. We need to be firm in our convictions. And something that I just can't get over in the story is the situation with how the diet played out. So when Daniel and his friends said that they weren't going to eat the royal food, the chief official, he was so concerned about the negative effects that this would have. He believed that after those 10 days, they were going to look so malnourished that the king was actually going to kill him because he allowed them to look that unhealthy. He could not see a scenario where their diet, following what God told them to do, did anything but harm them. And I think a lot of times, that's how we view the things that we read in the Bible. When we open the Bible and we read that we need to be forgiving, that we need to let go of our hurt, that we need to leave justice to the Lord, that we need to love the people who curse us, that we need to care for the needy and sick, that we need to avoid harmful words and negative thoughts, that we need to show grace, that we need to stay far away from the pleasures of the world, that we need to exercise self-control, that we need to work hard. Man, when we read those things in the Bible, sometimes we think, man, my life is going to be so miserable if I follow these things. My life is going to be so lame if I follow Jesus, and I'm not going to have any joy in my life if I do all the things that the Bible says. And that's just like the mindset that chief official had, where his view of doing things God's way was that it would only be negative. But what happened to Daniel and his friends when they were faithful to the Lord? What happened when they avoided the king's food and when they avoided the pleasures and the wildness of the Babylonian feasts? They didn't become unhealthy. They became more healthy. They didn't lose their joy and happiness. They gained happiness and joy. They were wiser. They were more knowledgeable, and they became greater than anyone around them because they lived the way that God told them to live. And that's the picture that we should see when we think about the life that God wants for us. The Bible is not a giant list of rules that God laid out so our lives would be miserable and lame. The Bible, and we'll put this on the screen, it shows us the path to the most fulfilling, joyful, abundant life possible. The Bible shows us the path to the most fulfilling, joyful, abundant life possible. The standards of the Bible, they don't suck out our joy for life. They provide the greatest joy. They provide the greatest peace. They provide us with security and stability and with hope. Now, this past week, there was a night where my wife was coming home from work a little bit late, so I had our kids, and I was trying to get them dinner by myself, and it was kind of intense because I'm trying to cook food, and I'm also trying to have them not hurt each other or hurt themselves or destroy the house. And so it was intense, and so our two sons, we've got a son that's like just turned 1, and another that's about 2.5. So they're pretty tiny little guys. And the older of the two, he is at the age where he wants to help with everything. And he's very, very helpful. But he's 2. And so he's dangerous in the kitchen. And so the other day, I'm trying to get them a smoothie. That was the first thing we wanted to make. And so my son, he really wanted to be involved in making the smoothie. So he opens the fridge, he gets the avocado out, he gets the kale out, and then he goes in the freezer and he gets all the frozen fruit. He goes up on the counter and he grabs a banana and he brings it all over to me. And I put everything in, and then he hits all the buttons to get it to start blending. And it was awesome. But then I wanted to make them quesadillas as well. And so at that point, I needed him to leave the kitchen because I can't have him in the kitchen when the burners are on. And so I was like, hey, buddy, go play with some toys for a few minutes, and then, we can eat some food. And he was really unhappy with me kicking him out of the kitchen. He was very, very unhappy. And I wrote down what he said because I thought it was really, really funny. He said, "Dad, I don't want you to say no to me anymore." He said, "I don't like it when you say that." And I thought that was such a genuine and interesting thing to say. He was saying I don't like that you're telling me that I can't do all the things that I want to do. And I think that's our attitude towards God when we disobey him. We're saying, look, I hear you. I've read in the Bible what I'm supposed to do, but I just don't really feel like doing those things. And when I'm asking my 2-year-old to leave the kitchen while the burners are on, I'm not saying I don't love you. I'm not saying I don't want your help. I'm saying I want to protect him from the pain and the hurt of placing his hand on the counter and burning himself. And I want him safe. I want him healthy. I want him happy. And look, that's what God's standards are for us. They're his way of keeping us safe. They're his way of keeping us healthy, his way of keeping us happy. Living for Jesus is the best life that we could live. And he wants that for us because he wants what's best for us. The Bible is not a list of rules that God laid out so our lives would be miserable and lame. The Bible shows us the path to the most fulfilling, joyful, abundant life possible. Now, before we close, I want to get practical because I think there's a lot of cool practical things we can learn from how disciplined and intentional Daniel and his friends were. They had really high standards for their lives, and they put in the work day after day to live up to those standards. Now, something that I do almost all the time, whether I'm driving the car or cutting the grass or doing the dishes, I'm always listening to football podcasts. Nonstop listening to football podcasts. And one of the ones that I listen to gets into the coaching and leadership side of the sport. I really like those. And a few episodes ago, they were talking about this phrase, and they said the phrase was "do simple better." It was about doing the simple things better. And I love that phrase. I think that is so valuable for us. There are a million things that we do every day from the time that we get up in the morning until we go to sleep at night. And a lot of the times we're just kind of going through the motions, doing the same things that we do day after day. You get up, you brush your teeth, hopefully. And And then you get your coffee, and then for me, like a bit after that, it's kind of getting the kids up and getting them changed and fed and out the door and to where they need to be. And then after that, it's into my work responsibilities, and then it's my household responsibilities and back into family time and just all these things. And what I find so valuable about the phrase do simple better is that it's a recognition that there are so many simple things that we do each day. And the goal is not just going through the motions, accomplishing things. The goal is to be intentional in everything we do, no matter how small it seems. I want to check out this verse with you guys. This is Ephesians 5, verse 15 and the beginning of 16. It says, "Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity." Every minute that we have here on this earth is a blessing, and every minute that we have on this earth is an opportunity. And this verse says to make the most of every opportunity. And I believe we do that by doing the simple things better. Instead of just getting the food made and on the table for your family, leave the dishes for later. Take a moment to sit down and engage with your family. Ask your kids about school. Ask your spouse about work. Take time to pray with them before you eat. Instead of taking that drive from your house to work and just spending the whole time angry at all of the other cars on the road and how they don't know how to follow the rules or go the speed limit, instead of spending that time with all of that in your head, spend that time being thankful that you're in a car that works, being thankful for your health. Spend that time praying and just thanking God for the different blessings in your life. Instead of going to your job and feeling all the stress of your workload and all the things on your to-do list, go to work and view all those things as an opportunity to crush it. You know, all those responsibilities, that's a blessing to have the opportunity to accomplish those tasks. And so give it your all when you're at work. And then, man, the second it hits 5 o'clock, head outside, hop in your car, go home, be the best spouse, be the best parent, be the best friend that you can be. What simple things in our lives can we do better? And what small steps can we take to have a more positive impact on our friends, on our family, on our marriage, on our health? Each day is filled with simple tasks, but doing those simple things better is how we make the most of every opportunity. So that's the first way. The second thing we can do, and this is a big one, I feel like it's a big one for me, is don't make excuses. Man, life is full of opportunities for us to compromise our standards, to take the easy way out. If you think about Daniel and his friends, man, every time they took the hard way. They had high standards and they did not take the easy way out. They stood up for what they believed in and they stayed strong in it. And because of that, God made them wiser than anyone in Babylon. And that doesn't happen if they make compromises. So what types of compromises do we make? Not spending time with our family? Or spending time staring down at our phone when we're in the same room as our family? Pretending that's family time? Not speaking to our spouse in love, not having patience with our kids, not giving our full effort at work, not staying on top of our healthy eating and fitness goals, not staying on top of our budget, not spending time reading the Bible, not caring about the people around us or taking time to pray. And it's so easy to justify acting this way when we find excuses. And I feel like ever since we had kids, I'm like the world's best excuse maker in the whole world. Do you guys want to hear my top excuses right now? Okay, number one excuse, I'm too tired. Anybody else relate to that? I didn't drink a lot of coffee before our kids were around, but I drink a lot of coffee now. And look, I'm too tired. That probably was valid like for the first couple months after our kids were born, but it's been a year. That's not really a good excuse anymore. So why do I not go to the gym consistently? Man, I'm exhausted. Why am I not cleaning the garage at night and I'm just sitting on the ground playing Xbox? I'm just so tired. Why do I have a short fuse with my wife and my kids? Because I don't have the energy to really engage the way that I need to. Can anybody relate to that? Second excuse, my other top one, I don't have time. Anybody relate to that one? I don't have time. After cleaning the house, doing the dishes, doing the clothes, I don't have time to cut the grass. And why am I ordering myself pizza at the end of the night instead of eating healthy? Well, I just picked the kids up. I just got them dinner and got them fed, got them bathed, brushed as many of their teeth as I could find in their mouths, read them a million books, finally got home to bed. I'm just going to eat a pizza. I don't have the time to make myself food after all that, something healthy. I don't have time to read the Bible in the morning. I don't have time to wake up early and pray. I don't have time to add a small group into my life. I don't have time to serve at my church. Who else makes some excuses? It's what we do. It's how we justify not living up to our standards. And my wife, she showed me this video the other day. While I listen to football podcasts all the time, my wife listens to podcasts by neuroscientists. Her brain is on a completely different level than what mine is. So she showed me this video, and it's this neuroscientist, and that's somebody who studies the brain. I'm explaining it to you because she had to explain it to me. They didn't teach me that when I got my communications degree. So this neuroscientist, he was talking about the effects of doing things that we don't want to do and how doing things that we don't want to do affects our brain. And so he shares that there's significant research that says when we do things we don't want to do, there's a part of our brain that actually gets bigger. When we diet and we resist unhealthy food, that area of our brain gets bigger. He also shared that this area of our brain is bigger in athletes. It's especially large in people who overcome challenges, and it has a connection to someone's will to live longer. Isn't that cool? Making excuses, that is a way for us to justify acting in a way that deep down we know isn't right. Making excuses is one of the most harmful things we can do for our lives because when we start to drift off course, our excuses are a justification for why going off course is acceptable. So when we look in the mirror and we take a moment to self-assess our choices and our motivations and who we are, and we look in the mirror and we say, how did I end up this way? How did I end up like so far from what I set out to be? Well, I believe that every excuse takes us 1 degree further away from our goal. It takes us 1 degree further off course. So we don't just wake up one day and overnight we've gotten out of shape, we've gained 20 pounds, and we're doing all these things that we don't like about ourselves. That's not how it works. When we drift off course, it's not immediate like that. It's a series of excuses, a series of actions that take us far away from what we set out to be. 1 degree at a time, our excuses take us further and further away from our goals. But when we're disciplined, when we do the things that we don't want to do, when we put in the hard work, when we don't make excuses, that's when we won't drift off course. And I don't think it's a coincidence that our brain, which God made, grows when we resist the temptation to give into excuses. That's intentional. Because being disciplined, being steadfast, keeping our standards, working hard, that's what's best for us. So why wouldn't our body be stronger and healthier when we're living the way that God intended for us to live? So what excuses are you making? What negative effects are those excuses having on your life? How are your excuses taking you further away from your goals? We need to follow the example of Daniel and his friends. We need to put an end to the excuses in our lives and start putting in the hard work of doing the things that we don't want to do so that we can become the person that we were created to be. Amen. As we close today, I want to encourage each one of you guys that God cares so deeply about you. Daniel and his friends, they were torn away from their families. They were torn away from their homes, taken to a foreign land that tried to erase everything about their identity and their religion. But they stayed true to God, and God stayed true to them. The challenges that we face in life, they try to make us question whether God really cares about us. But this story is more proof that he does. God will always be faithful to you in every challenge that you face, every hospital visit, every lost job, every bill that comes in the mail, every broken relationship. God will always be faithful. We just need to wake up each day and we make God's words in the Bible our standard. We do the simple things better. We avoid excuses and we stand firm in our faith. Let's pray. God, I thank you so much for this story of Daniel, and I thank you for showing us how you took care of him. It's so amazing how you were there with him through every moment of such a difficult situation in his life. And I pray that seeing how he responded to these challenges and all the cultural pressures that were on him, I pray that would inspire us to stay true to your word, I pray that it would inspire us to live boldly in faith for you. And I pray that everybody in here, I pray that they would know how much you care about them. No matter what they're facing in life, I pray that they would know that you're faithful and that you're good and you are greater than anything they're facing in their lives. I pray this in your name. Amen.